about automatic trading and performance. Performance being a term, let's say, really used together with automatic trading usually. We have two guests here. It's Christopher Lederer, you saw before, he's a development manager at Florin Traders. Then we have Florin Bunău, he's a technical expert at Ullink. And Cotyso, Bodea, he's a technical director at Tora. All of them have local offices here in Cluj. My first question, in order to clarify a little bit this domain, is for each of them, is to tell us a little bit about the company where I work and what kind of product I'm developing. So please, if you want to.
Okay, we have Florin Traders, we are a trading company in the first instance. We developed our own software in the last 10 years. We noticed that using third-party software is difficult for us, because there's always a certain overhead, there's always certain things you buy into that you don't really need, or that actually might hinder you. And if we talk about performance, keep it simple, it's not performance. That's one thing you see. Secondly, we started developing our own software so we can be more flexible. When we started, we traded 4 or 5 markets. We are a market maker, global leader in ETF. That's electronic traded funds. We are quite dominant there. It's all about low latency. It's trading from Amsterdam, in New York, from Amsterdam, in Hong Kong, Moscow, wherever you trade. 60 markets, as I said. We started to develop our own software flexibility. Also, the maintainability is a very important factor. We are not necessarily dependent on a bigger company struggling with the workload. Most of the ISVs, of course, have a certain tendency to sell more. There's always the urge to bring the software to someone else. And we don't have that urge at all. We develop the software as it fits our traders. So I'll give you a nice example. If a trader wants to strip the color somewhere, we don't really we say, okay, if you like it better, or we have colleagues that are color black, then do it black and white. Why not? As an ISV, where you have to service multi-levels, different trading companies, different customers, so to say, it's far more difficult. Different process of designing the software. You have to think about dependencies that don't really exist for us. It's not necessarily much easier to work with your customer face to face. You know, if you're working for a bigger software company, you might hide. Our developers can't. So everyone has his name written all over it. So that's something special. It is a nice challenge. And as said, we are very successful in what we do. We had not one trading loss in the last 12 years. We're pretty proud of that. Of course, it also speaks for our systems. And as I said, they're all streamlined to us, not to someone else. And that's it. I think when it comes down to electronic trading, what is important for us is, of course, reliability, performance, because if you have something that is very performant but not reliable, that might bite you somewhere where you don't want to be bitten. And we really take care of that. And it's, of course, a very creative process because we can really trust that the users are really coming with good intentions and they will not harm anyone else. You know, so if you have a very good trading idea and you're a general software vendor, then you have to be always very careful. How will the other users react to it? We don't usually have that. Of course, no, we don't have that. Even in smaller teams, there's always consensus in the end of the day how to do it and how to do it best. That is something that will certainly distinguish us from these guys, where you have to service a lot of other guys. And I know exactly what they do. I worked in total 14 years for ISVs, independent software vendors, where you face this kind of problems every day. So I'm very lucky where I am today. So.
Thanks. So I'm working for Ullink. Ullink is a global provider of electronic trading software, also connectivity and infrastructure. So we develop the software for enabling other companies to trade, like tier 1 banks. We can also provide either enhancements to their existing platform, if they want to enable trading, or just connectivity. We either like manage a fully managed solution, or like a hybrid solution where we partially manage it, or they just rent it for and manage it themselves. I would like to counteract your point. I don't think it's like a competition who does like better trading software. Obviously, there's like differences between building in-house or building a product, and certainly for the business itself, you can build something very custom. But if you build a product, then you can learn from multiple sources. You can integrate multiple sources of knowledge in your product. And generalization is in programming preferred to specialization, let's say. But I think both approaches are very valid, obviously. They're just different businesses. And the end result is just clients to be happy. Some clients are in-house and some clients are out-of-house. I think we built quite quality software. Yeah, if you have any more questions about what we do.
Thank you. So I'm Cotyso Bodea. I'm technical director at Tora. We are, like speaking after Chris and Florin, we are maybe a combination between the two. We are both an ISV. Well, in a way we are an ISV, but we started off as a hedge fund. So basically similar to what Flow Trader is. And we found out at some point that our technology was so good that some other people wanted access to it. So we said, yeah, why not? Let's license parts of it. So that's what Tora actually does. That's how Tora came into existence, as a spin-off from a hedge fund. And we develop and offer, so Tora offers software for hedge funds. As I said, starting from the technology we developed for a hedge fund, for our own hedge fund, but we do not offer that part, like the critical, differentiating part. We don't. That's still being developed only for this hedge fund. But the technology, the more mainstream technology, which is the EMS and PMS, RMS, are offered to other clients as well. So in a way, we see both sides of this, and I am really familiar with both. I spent quite a few years working on HFT on the hedge fund side, and I've been spending the last quite a few years on the ISV side. So there are definitely different challenges to both. And since we're talking about performance here, there are performance issues in both. They are different. In the hedge fund case, you definitely need to focus on low latency, which is the name of the game there. On the ISV part, you need to focus on throughput and supporting high volumes and in order to be able to support multiple clients. And as I said, challenges are different. There are challenges on both sides of the fence. Well, we've been around for quite a long time here. We are quite big in Cluj, so I guess people kind of know about us. Yeah, so Ovidiu, let's.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if you got to technical terms, you can explain them, because probably not all the people are in the field. Okay, so the next question is, what technology are you using inside, like languages? I don't know if there is some open source libraries that you are using. I mean, in general, not, And you know, any kind of what technology are used inside, like, you know, C++, Java, what kind of or functional, or you know, if you can.
Both work, and that's the same with the software. If it works, it's fine. I will not start any religious war because you know, if it's Java or C++, we have taken a certain route that for our connectivity we use usually C++. Has to do with shared memory access, which is the fastest communication way we know at this moment of time. Has of course a back foot in terms of maintainability, expandability to other systems. You have to redo it there. Java offers certain functions which I think are very valid. Open source. Quick fix, I think Julia wrote a nice article about fixed libraries. So the fixed protocol, what is a fixed protocol? A financial inter-exchange. That means it's a communication protocol. You know, in the end of the day, we trade bananas, we trade everything in the end of the day, and we want to communicate with every opponent, with every customer. We are market maker. So just to have that very clear, we are not taking a position. We don't have a tendency in the market. We are just there to service the market and try to be the fastest. So we don't keep the rotten bananas. You know, we give them away as soon as we can, if there's a need for it.
One quick question: what is the latency of transaction? I mean, when you are, I mean, what's the level of latency there?
Microseconds.
Okay, so
at
microseconds.
Least,
okay.
At least. Internal processing is nanoseconds. External is microseconds. So all exchanges started to report meanwhile in microseconds. That's just due to the amount of traders and trading that happens every day. There's millions of transactions, and they all have to be reported. And if we look at the reporting side, we see more Java because you have more flexibility. It scales better. But if it's about speed, we still prefer C++. But of course, we have Perl, we have all other languages as well. Everything, that's very important, and I think that's also a difference, and I didn't want to refer to the quality of software, sorry. Absolutely not. I think everyone has the right of existence, and there's very good use cases, and Ullink is quite an established company for years. That's for sure. But, you know, we don't have to deal with that. So that's an issue we usually don't have. We develop the things for ourselves. We create our own dresses, and if someone else doesn't like them, it doesn't really matter to us. Because the market will tell us if we're ugly or not, and we will feel it instantly. It takes a second, and then we know if we were good or bad. And of course, important for us is not to be fixed on problems. Always keep an open approach. Technology is so what from fast forward. Whoever thinks backwards has lost already. That's how we see it. So, in general, we are Java and C++, but we are open to any technology. That's very important to us.
So coming back to your question about technology, we're using Java mostly, but now we're having the new projects. We're trying to find better technology. We're working with Scala lately. I can talk about what benefit this brings, mostly because of function programming. So we all do software here, right? So what software needs is good rate of change, so that you can implement change easily in your program. So the holy grail of software is composability and modularity. I think functional programming brings these advantages, brings the modularity aspect and the composability. So composability is the property of seeing a system, understanding a system by understanding all the parts plus the rules of composition. And modularity is the property of being able to split your software into parts and understand them separately and recombine them, hopefully in the future, in new meaningful ways, without actually building for this. So functions are the most composable and modular things possible. So for us, what is really important is being able to maintain the software, being able to introduce change without affecting the system and maintaining quality. So this is an area that we're looking forward into, functional programming. Traditionally, the whole industry uses C++ and Java, and we also use mostly Java. But this is because of, let's say, historical reason. Tools were not developed in the past as much, and I think other domains are also looking to change their way of thinking about how to develop software. And we're trying to do that also.
Sounds good.
So, speaking about functional programming, I remember talking to Florin more than a year ago when they were starting using it, and I was telling him that I'm not really a big believer in functional programming, but I'm actually rooting for them to. I was hoping they will pull it off and show that it works, even if I'm not a big believer. So I still hope functional programming will become more prevalent and more widespread. I'm still not sure it will happen, but going back to what we use at Tora, we use mainly Java, and we also have the most critical low latency parts of systems are written in C++, with some small, very critical pieces, small pieces in assembler, hand-shaped assembler, but very small. Most of our software is written in Java, and actually we've tried some low latency stuff in Java. So a couple of our colleagues, one of them is here, have built a low latency chain system in Java, and basically they achieved single-digit microseconds, which is extremely good for Java, something like 7 or 8 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I can tell you that, for example, that our first try at HFT system, HFT means high frequency trading. So our first try at HFT system was written in C++, and it was double digit microseconds. So actually they did achieve in Java better than what we first achieved in C++. Obviously they benefited from a lot of experience and advice and whatever. So this is actually an interesting development, let's say, which has arisen lately. It depends a lot on basically what are you trading and the specifics of the market. If you are in FX trading, like currency trading, then the performance requirements are extremely high because the algorithm basically for trading is very, very simple. You just compare a few values, and then you need to be extremely smart, extremely fast. Right? So then there you will find people not only implement their algorithm hardware, but actually putting that hardware within the switch or the routers. So it's not even a separate machine. It's actually in the switch. You have a CPU there, which is not a CPU, it's a FPGA or something like that. Hardware basically is, and the switch does the trading. So it's basically nanoseconds. So it's really crazy. But that's FX. If you need something more complex, for example, we were doing option arbitrage, option versus futures, then you need more. You need to make smarter decisions, and then you cannot implement that in hardware. Or maybe nowadays some people do. We are not doing that anymore. So maybe, but anyway, it depends a lot on which market you are, whether you need more or less performance in order to be faster than the rest of the guys on the market. So, and in some cases, it might be enough to do it in Java, or maybe even, I don't know, for example, if you try to do it in, you can try, for example, to do electronic trading on the Bitcoin exchanges, and there the performance requirements are not that high. You can do it in Python or whatever, or JavaScript, it doesn't really matter. So it's a lot of choosing the right technology for the right market where you want to trade.
Sounds good and interesting. I'm just curious, are you using, for example, machine learning? I mean, can be used if you have this small latency?
Yeah, so there is a lot of machine learning and AI being used in automatic trading, and actually my colleague Johnny has written a pretty long article. Half of it, I think, made it into this issue of the magazine. I invite you to read that if you're interested in machine learning. Well, it's not an easy article to read because the area is extremely advanced in terms of AI and machine learning, and actually it's one of the very few areas, if not the only one, where machine learning and AI was actually used in production for quite a while. I mean, machine learning and AI was used a lot in academia. It was extremely widespread in academia up to a couple of years ago, but in automatic trading it was used extensively, and it's still being used extensively by all the major traders are trying to use it and are trying to make even more use of it. And what's a little bit specific here is that the research being done in AI in automatic trading is is done behind closed doors by all the big companies, and whatever transpires is, let's say, yesterday's news. So I was talking to a guy he's doing a PhD in Germany exactly in this area, like machine learning for financial exchanges, and he was telling me somehow he got access. He didn't tell me how, but he got access to some internal papers from Goldman or whatever, one of the big guys, and he told me they were so more advanced than what you can find in the public, in the academia, for example, something like that. So anyway, it's definitely one of the hottest areas where machine learning and AI is being used, and was being used for quite a while.
Sounds really good. I don't know if you want to comment on the AI.
Sure. Well, I think we have to distinguish between types of trading, because maybe people don't understand what kind of trading can we do. So there are like multiple sides. There are like buy sides and sell sides. Sell sides are the brokers and the people that are giving you the infrastructure to trade. Buy sides are like privately owned funds, for example, or pension funds that trade for themselves. AI, I think, is mostly applied to, let's say, hedge funds. Hedge funds are these specialized institutions, let's say, or like companies that are trying to beat the market or invest the money. People have different segments of investment. Some people want to invest for 1 microsecond. Other people want to invest for 3 years or 10. So it depends on your time span in trading. How much do you hold the asset? For example, a pension fund would, the people that get our pension money and want to give us more when we get older, they have more larger lifespans, and for them a microsecond or 10 or whatever doesn't matter. They just buy it, they do an analysis of the market. It may take them 3 months to do one analysis and then buy over a longer period of time. And for them, microseconds don't count. But for them, maybe models would count, how they model the market. So here is where AI might come into picture. So what is going on in trading right now is that there are different players. A lot of PhDs are being employed to generate these models, and AI is a hot topic in software. The trend in software generally is to automate. That's what software does, automate human business. I think we reached a point where we have automated most of the simple stuff, where you get data from one part, put data in the other part. This is what trading was up to now, let's say. You get data from, you get the trade, you post it somewhere. It's like automation. But I think the whole field of software is going in the next step, next phase of automation, where maybe intelligence will come. So, in my opinion, not a lot of people are doing AI. Certainly there are these big banks that are doing it, but it's not so widespread in the field.
Chris, if you want to comment on this?
Yes, of course. I think Florin is right. It's commonly used, I would say. Everyone has an eye on it. Everyone wants to understand how it works. We do the same. We have also PhDs, of course, that investigate for us. It's very important. Again, you have to be where the competition is, where the market goes. I think that we'll see a couple of years where we'll have a lot of tryouts, and there will be a lot of error happening as well. One important factor for us, and this is certainly different with these guys, we have a very clear use case. So we don't have to evaluate what might a customer use. We are our own customers. So for us, artificial intelligence is very important in parameterizing. How are our parameters? Can artificial intelligence help us? Which parameter in a post-trade, in a pre-trade environment is important? And we learn that slowly but softly. I think artificial intelligence is also us to learn what we want to expect from artificial intelligence. It is already intelligence artificial. There is already kind of a contradiction in there, and we should always highlight that. There's very good use cases, I'm absolutely sure. We see that already. Does it play down in numbers? Do we make 1 million more a day if we have artificial intelligence? We don't know that yet. Because one thing that we haven't discussed here is software is like the engine of a car. You won't put your engine on the start line, it will just not win, that's for sure. You need the wheels, you need far more than just one component of a driving car. You need a good driver, you need the best mechanics, you need good tires. We all know that, and that's what plays into our field. And I think that's the same for you guys. So if you have smart and super smart, intelligent software that goes quick, if you execute that on the lowest possible lines, then you're good. If your lines to an exchange are already slow, not low latent, then all your efforts were used seriously. That's something where we see the difference in our use case, because we have to integrate those. We have very smart people in networking. We look even down to the switch level, but what can be done on that level to get rid of some overhead, make it even faster if possible. Because there's multiple sites where we can gain speed. And with gaining speed, it's mainly gaining control. You're in a much better control if you're leading than if you're in the back, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. And my curiosity, how do you test this system? Do you test them, or you just put them in production and see I mean,
if I would say yes now, I would be in jail in 2 seconds. To be very honest, we are highly regulated, and that's not even a joke. Regulation plays a big part in our business. Everyone is looking at us, and you always have these discussions. If it's just the pureness of speed, the pureness of it's the pureness of everything we do. It's a chain of things. It's not one independent argument, not one independent component that will make us all happy and rich. That's for sure not. It is more than that. As I said a couple of times before, performance for us is something that lives with the team, lives with every individual within the chain, trying to bring the best out of it and to make it better every day. That's how we see it.
Yeah, but but having such a system, so high performance system, do you have some bigger system around it for testing? To test the if it's good or not, or if this is faster, or if this strategy is better. Are you playing with older data and see how it behaves?
Of course. As I said before, we have regulation for that. So we cannot just have a wonderful piece of code, deploy it, put it into production. If something goes wrong, we might lose our trading license instantly. We have to test everything we do. QA is a very, very important factor within our whole development cycle. It's extremely important that we have to prove regulators everything. So we have to prove that the software was tested, that it contains unit tests. Change management, we have a whole procedure for change management. Because of course, if we do something wrong, and it might be a regression, it might be something else, it will be seen instantly. So if you're in a trading market and the market is just going down and you send orders up for whatever reason, regulators will think, so what risk are you running here, guys? So therefore, everything has to be tested very thoroughly. One of the biggest burden we have ourselves every day again are all the mandatory updates. That with 60 exchanges, you have 60 changes every year, and those changes must all be documented. So we get audits. Exchanges will visit us and will say, like, we saw that you changed your interface status twice this year. Can you show us what was changed in the source code? Can you show what happened? That's our regulation now. And it's rightfully so. In the end of the day, it is of course a burden, but it's a burden that hits every one of us. So every of our competitors is obliged to the same rules, has to obey the same rules. So it doesn't really matter to us. It's an overhead, and we want to be streamlined. But in the end of the day, it's rightfully so. There must be tight controls on that one. Even it's not nice, but it's mandatory because there is a consequence to that. We all know flash crashes. When they are caused, a lot of people might lose a lot of money. And it's a closed system, so it doesn't generate money itself. Money comes in, money goes out, but it's always what goes in, what goes out. So if I make $1 million, someone lost $1 million. And that's of course something that the opponent will always criticize instantly. Will always say that you did something wrong. You're not applying to the rules. You do something that I can't do or I shouldn't. So that's all highly regulated.
I think you clarified me. Thanks, Chris.
So on the testability subject, I agree because, maybe a short parable before, if you know Uncle Bob Martin, like the father of clean code, he's talking about, in one of his talks, he says, we have to make the code quality, we have to make the code as best as possible, because if we don't, in the future regulators will come and will make us do quality software. So we have to change ourselves now. We have to come up with our own methods. Otherwise, in the future, someone will impose stuff on us. What is happening now? Since 2016, MiFID II has been a splash in the trading community, and we are doing a lot of MiFID II work in Ullink. We are having, for our clients, compliance with MiFID II, and this is a big topic. It will be launched in 2018. And for the other people that are not in the domain, what MiFID II is a set of directives from the European Union which mandate certain aspects of trading software. There are a couple of directives where they specifically say that you have to cover the algorithms that you're launching. You have to test them. How they will verify this, no one knows yet. They're not. So the level 1 and 2 texts are published, but the level 3 text, which is at the national regulation level, is not yet fully available. But we can see that trading is the first industry to be regulated in this quality regard. Maybe, I don't know, space software is also regulated. But this is a trend that I think we will see in the future for software.
This sounds very interesting. And so basically they will look at your documentation, right? Or?
Yeah, as said by Florin, that's already happening. So of course you have to register already if you use algos or not. You have to document that. You have to inform the exchange. That's also a regulation that comes in. And as what Florian said, in 2018, all the directives should be out. It's still a bit vague. Some things are really not clear yet. Regulators are also struggling to find the right wording, to find the right level of regulation. Because if you over-regulate the market, then they will bite in their own flesh. And you also have to see MiFID in the global scale. Trading companies and the benefits of trading will just shift somewhere else where there's less regulation. And you already see that discussion with the new American president, I will not name him here, who tends to lower the regulation burden, potentially will lower the regulation burden in the US, just to open another market. This market needs to be regulated, and it's rightfully so. And of course, we are controlled already today. We have to make, just imagine, you develop a new interface to a new exchange, and there will be a conformance test. So it really means that the developer, product analyst, product manager will sit in front of a screen opposing the exchange, which has an exchange test system. And they will shoot in orders, and they will see how your algo reacts to those. And they can be eradicated. And of course, they want to see that as soon as there's a erratic movement in the market, your algo instantly withdraws and doesn't send millions of orders. So there is already today a kind of a test. How far this will go, because we are also touching intellectual property. Yeah? We have to be very clear on that one as well, especially on the algo side, on the low latency algo side. You don't want to expose yourself how you got there, how you take your decisions in an instant, nanosecond. That's for sure.
Yeah, so sounds good. I didn't know about it. Also, if you have questions from the public, you can.
Let me add something here on the testability. So, both Chris and Florin did talk quite a bit about regulation, but since it's automatic trading, the first driver is always the possibility of a loss. I mean, you can basically bankrupt your company, your whole company in microseconds, and this is what was seen with the flash crash of Knight Capital, and that usually is the first driver for testing. I mean, you want to be extremely sure you will not bankrupt your company like this, and afterwards, comes the regulation. Well, everybody does test, and everybody is extremely careful about testing. And I think, I don't know, maybe for example, Florin was talking about other areas where there's a regulation. For example, software in the automotive industry is highly regulated, so there are a few other areas where there's a lot of regulation, but I think the financial market is very close to that, and would be very close to that even without any regulation. Exactly because you can basically do a lot of damage to yourself if you don't test as much as you can.
I see. And now. A different question. Do you think you can apply your knowledge to other domains, or do you see any relation with this? I mean, if you can give some example, or.
So if I can start. So we are actually, I did mention this briefly in my article in this issue of the magazine. Actually, electronic trading is happening more and more in quite a few fields, right? So, okay, we have eBay, where you have people using automatic traders, like automatic trading tools. You have bet exchanges, like, for example, Betfair has, right? And they have tools for automatically trading the bets there. Or for example, you have electronic exchanges for, I don't know, cryptocurrencies, or you have a lot of electronic exchanges in the ad industry. So there are quite a few areas where you have this kind of electronic exchanges where performance and speed is basically the name of the game. Now, None of those is as advanced, let's say, as the financial market, but definitely they are, and they are growing, and they are more and more industries actually have this kind of technology as their backbone.
Sounds good.
I would like to add that this general collection of Bitcoin, I know, other stuff you mentioned, bad industry and stuff like this. We are seeing now crowdfunding, like crowdsource, anything that involves money flowing from one place to the other is generally known as fintech, finance technology. And I think what we're seeing now is with more mobile computing, more access to the internet, more stuff like this, the classical trading where there's like an institutional exchange, one per country or two per country maximum or whatever, like the traditional trading places are starting to not lose ground but be just one of many other places. For example, with the advent of MiFID II, they're trying to, we're having like block discovery or continuous auction venues. It's not something new, but my point is that even in the traditional space, more and more venues appear, more and more stuff. MTFs were uncommon like 7 years ago, 10 years ago. But we're seeing even in the consumer space all these little parts. Maybe there are people that have Bitcoin or are trading I don't know, doggy coin or whatever. So I think going back to your question about can you apply this knowledge, you can apply it in the new nascent fields, the new fields that are emerging. A lot of maybe ex-traders started trading Bitcoin or started finance ventures out of the traditional space. I think you can apply that.
Yeah, there's multiple industries. When I see where do really good performance developers hide in the end of their lives, aviation industry, automotive industries. It's not only where money is involved, it's also where a decision has to be taken, and it has to be a thorough decision. So potentially you want to run multiple scenarios before finally deciding. You really see that. Aviation industry, you don't want to crash in the Heathrow Tower, because then you have 1 million of planes above your skies, and they will just crash into each other. It will just happen. So there's various fields, and not only involving money, it's also the quality of the decision you take. You know, if we have a bad decision, it might cost us a couple of millions. If aviation software has a problem, it might cost hundreds of lives. So it really depends on the decision taking. The challenge is to find the best way to avoid risk. The adherence of risk is extremely important in all these fields. So that's why you see a lot of very good C++ developers hiding in aviation software.
I see. Okay. If you have any question from the public, okay.
I think I'm just curious, if you have in your company implemented trading system, maybe you can go to some interest there. So automatic trading, the system which you program, following some strategies, and you leave overnight and make some just.
I'm the bad person to... No. Maybe to clarify a bit more. There's really different levels. We are not a prop trading company, so we seriously don't have an idea what the position that we currently hold will do tomorrow. Of course, we have analysts that will tell us, today you should be very careful with automotive industry. You should not necessarily buy any metals because there's some public figures coming out, so that might be a risk. We don't hold any kind of position. We don't say, I think tomorrow gold will go up 20%, so let me buy today for a couple of millions and then see next. We usually don't have positions overnight. We really service a market. You come in, you want something. We have an obligation as market maker, that's our qualification, to service you, to buy from you, to sell from you. Of course, with a different spread. We make our money in between. like every dealer would do. But in the end of the day, we don't have a position on the market. We have, of course, as I said, multiple decisions to be taken while we execute an individual trade. Is what he offers me, is that the right thing? Is that what I want? Or is it maybe, as I said, the banana you don't want to have in your basket? Those decisions we take, but we don't have any positions overnight. That's certainly different for other customers of Ullink, where they might take a decision only after 3 months and then hold the decision for 6. We are not in that area at all.
Well, to answer your question, we just provide services to clients. The clients, what they do with those software is their business. We certainly provide market making software. So if they want to be market makers, which is kind of like an automated trade, we can automate it. Or we just provide the connectivity and they build the algorithms, but we don't have a specific product for this. Just enable them to build their algorithms.
I think I'll just skip this because Ioana knows fully well what Tora does. She's from Tora, so.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I was curious actually, even myself, but I didn't ask the question, so it was, I think, in my list. Yes, so I mean, if you are talking about automated trading and what exactly is happening on exchange, can you clarify what's the impact of automatic trading versus traditional trading? I mean, what's the impact of the traditional trading on the stock, and what's the impact of the automated trading?
Okay, so if I can start here. So usually what happens is that, okay, there are a couple, you have the high frequency trading and you have the, let's say, directional trading. The high frequency trading is done by the guys who just want to make money on the movements of the stocks. And then you have the directional trading, which is performed by pension funds, long-only funds, whatever. The guys who, as Florin was saying, maybe or Chris, I don't remember, sorry, they analyze for 3 months and then they continue buying or selling for 2 years, something like that. Those are the guys who do who basically dictate the direction of the market. Now, that's HFT versus not HFT. Now, automatic trading can be used in both these scenarios. For both HFT, where it's only automatic trading, you cannot be low latency with a human trader, but automatic trading can also be used for directional market, and it's actually being used. Like, okay, you want to buy, I don't know, Sony stock for the next 2 years, but you want to buy it in as efficient manner as possible, and then you might use an algorithm to basically buy it like a piece of at a time for like over a span of a few years, because otherwise you might crash the stock, for example, or drive it extremely high up if you just go out there and buy without being very careful. So automatic trading as a whole is what in HFT is basically it's a monopoly. In directional trading is basically it's a tool which is being used more and more, and I think pretty much everybody is using it. But I think all the companies actually use it. Not necessarily all the traders. There are still old-fashioned traders within the companies who just prefer to just click on the button to buy or sell or whatever. But I think any company which has a sizable, which is not like one-man show or something like that, they do automatic trading. They do use it, whether it's through their own systems or through some algos provided by brokers.
I see.
Just want to say that, like, who does trading is actually people with money, or let's say capital holders. So this is what Cotyso was saying about the directional traders. The real people in the market are the ones that have long-term goals, long-term investments. they may just pick up the phone and phone a broker and say, just, I want to invest in technology stocks because I have the money to do it. Then the broker takes the order and maybe uses some algorithms or some strategy. But so the guy with the money is the buy side and the broker is the sell side. So, and there are other players where they are not interested in investing, they just, let's say, I wouldn't say skimp the directional traders, but most of the trading is done by these guys that have big interest, and they have big blocks of trades. They trade hundreds of million, blocks of hundreds of million, and they won't trade it all at once. And they have some kind of automated trading, electronic trading, but it's also done with a strategy in mind. I don't know if this answers your question,
Yeah.
but my point is that not all people trade very fast or you get my point.
Yeah, I got it. And basically this is what the market is reacting to, these guys with the money, right?
Yeah.
I think both have a right of existence. We have, believe it or not, we have manual traders as well.
Yeah.
So we have guys that really click. They don't have a computer calculating anything for them. They just have a very good understanding of the market, and they might be replaced sooner or later by artificial intelligence. God knows. Might be in a year's time. Might be in 10 years. Might be never. I think both do coexist. And as Florin pointed out correctly, the big guys with the big money, they read a newspaper. They're analysts. They have pension funds. They will send orders in values of billions, and they don't even need a computer for that. Of course, electronic trading came into evolution initially mainly for reporting reasons. And to be very clear, there is always a discussion that markets one day might say, I will only allow an order of 200 milliseconds, and then you have to wait 200 milliseconds. So really killing, in that sense, HFT trading as well. Because people always want to take a side. And for us, everything is possible and everything should be possible because we have to adhere to the market and not to our own ideas. That, you know, as a service organization, we are a market maker and liquidity provider. We have, you know, if we have to go back to manual trading, yeah, the traders will be happy and the developers will be unhappy, but that's how the market would react then.
I see. And I mean, all the electronic trading seems somehow pretty close to some you know, players. Do you think it's possible for startups to be in this space? Do you see startups in the area? I mean, not necessarily highly found, let's say like 2 students start something.
What currently protects our business model as we drive it, and it might be completely different for any other trading house or trading activity, is the technology we're using. We are extremely technology focused. That's what keeps us alive, constantly be on top of the game. But in the end of the day, if you have a smart idea, you know, I always think about big data. How long will it take us? If you would see the last 30 years of trading, you know, now we will sooner or later have 30 years of trading data. We have to store all our trades, every order we send for 7 years. You know, we are moving terabytes of data across the globe every day. There is good ideas, and I know a lot of traders. I met a lot of traders that really do manual trading, and they don't necessarily hold a position overnight either. They just have a certain understanding. Yes, everyone. Let's be very honest. 20 years back, you had to call a broker. And nowadays, you log into your mobile phone and you send an order, and you buy 20 Daimler Chrysler, or you buy 20 Porsche. Why not? And if you know something that no one else knows, and we're not talking about insider, but you have a certain feeling, or you think, okay, I buy me now a Mercedes, so if I do it, someone else might do it. So maybe I buy low and sell high and get 20% rebate from Porsche. There's possibilities, and I would never exclude it. Rather the opposite. And I would never say this is bad or not. You know, everyone has the right of existence, and the market will tell us who survives and not.
Nothing to add.
So I would say, I mean, it's a pretty high hurdle, basically, the entry into this market. It's really difficult. You need a lot of money in order to get access to an exchange. It's extremely costly. Infrastructure, whatever. I would say no startup can play the speed game unless it's extremely well funded. You might need to spend years developing your technology just to start it. However, I do see a couple of easier entry points. One of them would be, let's say, as I mentioned before, the exchanges for the cryptocurrencies, which are pretty open, let's say, and they are not heavily traded. There are a few professional. Basically, the markets themselves, the financial markets, are split between institutional investors and what we call retail investors, which is mom and pop, like people on the street trading like me or somebody trading by myself. And so basically, a startup with just a couple of students, as you mentioned, would actually enter into this territory, the retail investors. And on the financial markets, like the classical financial markets, it would be extremely difficult. On these kind of cryptocurrency markets, they might be able to make it because those are not heavily traded by the institutional investors. There are a few institutional investors there, but definitely not as much as on the classical exchanges. And another possible entry point, there's like if you have a very good idea, like Chris was saying, if you know something which nobody else knows, basically that means if you have a strategy for trading, which is better than anybody, which is extremely difficult, but let's say it's possible. If you are extremely smart and figure out something, then there are entry points, like there is a fund, I don't remember the name, where if you have an idea, you can implement your strategy and basically run it through that fund. It's a quant fund, basically it's for wannabe quants, let's say. So if you have a strategy and you can implement it, you get you can use your money or prove your idea, and so there are a couple of possible entry points, let's say, if you are really good and
interesting. Okay.
I might add here that I think you're referring to quantopian.com, maybe. So there is this site called Quantopian where they provide you the APIs, they provide you like data, and you can write your algorithm, you can backtest it, that's how you test on historical data, and you just run it with your own money and see if it works.
And if you win, you can win your...
If you win, you make money. It's not their, they're just giving you the tools, it's your own money that you trade.
But it's extremely difficult. I mean, it is extremely difficult. The guys who are in this space are extremely smart. I mean, they're Nobel Prize winners, they are Fields Medal winners, working for the institutional investors. So it's extremely difficult to go up against these guys and against the whole market, like all of them together. Extremely difficult to do that. I don't necessarily run it, I don't want to rule it out completely, but chances are extremely small.
Okay. Okay, do we have any question from the public? I mean, I can stay here all night and talk about Okay, Julia?
I consider myself a very creative person. I'm wondering how this would help, not about trading, but about the performance. How does creativity play a role in choosing the right solutions and choosing your common approach?
Okay, how good are you in technical terms, besides being a creative person? Do you know the register of inter-CPU? Do you know the inner workings of a switch or a router, as Chris was saying? So if you are extremely, I mean, you need to be extremely good from a technical perspective, and then it helps to be creative. Definitely helps, but you need to know the low-level stuff very well. You need to remember what I was talking about performance, like in my presentation earlier. And so you need, if you are very good, if you know your stuff, like your technical stuff, really good, it definitely helps to be creative, like finding solutions nobody else thought about. Yeah, it definitely can help. But just being creative by itself. Yeah. If you want to answer something else.
If you're creative enough to beat Amdahl's law, then you can use creativity in performance. I mean, creative in general, just in the general sense of a software engineer, you can come up with solutions or algorithms. Maybe you can approach. So performance is not just about pure numbers. Maybe performance is about the algorithm, the change, the complexity of the algorithm. You're creative enough to find a solution that no one else sees, and you can optimize an existing algorithm. Then yes, I think you can apply this to performance.
I have a bit of a different view there.
I think you know better, Julia, right?
And maybe it's, again, because of our position. Of course, you're absolutely right, you need the underlyings. But as a developer at FlowTraders, if you look up what is development, it's finding pattern, finding new solutions to problems. That's also what describes creativity. If you really take a deep look, go tonight, don't necessarily check Wikipedia, maybe an old book, and they say creativity and development, you will find a lot of similarities. Those similarities, we try to capitalize on. We really try to do that. We really try to understand, is there something else than just the pure number? And there is, yes, we know that. We have seen a lot of wonderful ideas coming out of the blue. You know, it took mankind hundreds of thousands of years to invent the wheel. When you look up to the moon, you see a wheel. If you look to the sun, you see a wheel. Why did it take us so long? It is very simplified, sometimes just thinking out of the box. As I said before, status quo. It's also think out of the box. We learn a lot from developers that worked in the medical industry. We learn a lot from developers who never had to do anything with money, aviation industry. We also hire guys from there. Just because they have sometimes a complete different perspective to a certain problem we might find somewhere in our code base. You know, how to interact with connectivity. You know, using smarter ways to communicate prices. Instead of sending 7 digits, can you potentially find a better way to do that? Just save some latency on the line and bandwidth on the line. You know, saving bandwidth is always preferable as well. So there is, if you have a certain status already, you know, if you sit at home and you think, okay, now I want to be very creative, think about pink elephants and design an algo to make me rich, it's not going to work. Seriously, it's not going to work. But it might work if you have already a very complex system to take away a bit of complexity by being creative, by trying to find a pattern that no one else ever thought about. That's where we see the best benefits, besides diversification, etc. We discussed that before. So yes, for us, creativity is one important factor in a mindset of a developer, and we really try to encourage that. So our developers actually ask, you know, once in a while to ask stupid questions, not to just consider the status quo to be there. It is very important. That's at least our experience.
Sounds like a nice culture. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm curious if you could share a lesson learned from running the high performance system. Maybe there was some sort of operational glitch at some point, and there's an interesting story behind it. I'm curious what would happen in such cases, and what can be done to avoid it.
They call it post-mortem, try to find out why the body is dead in front of you. Yeah, of course, every day something might happen. If it's a technician that presses a red button because he doesn't know what it would do, and it brings down all the servers, happens. You know, we heard before flash crash Night Capital. That was a regression bug that was in the software for years, and no one even thought about it. Of course, we are on the same sun, and things do go wrong, unfortunately. And then you only hope that you have the right risk system that prevents you, from going down. And of course, there is, again, extreme regulation on top of that. When we send order which is over our order limit size, which is set every day by the exchange and by ourselves, there should not be a bigger risk for us. But there was an incident a couple of years ago where a trader entered an invalid number, but the risk system couldn't really understand the number, and instead of blocking the order from going through, it just went through. The same happened to the exchange. And then the exchange finally stopped the trade from being executed. That can happen. It can happen every day. Another important thing which we often saw when you go for connectivity on a Java solution, you have the wonderful garbage collection. Garbage collection on a 32 gig memory might take a while. If we execute in nanoseconds, while the garbage collection takes milliseconds, we might not see certain orders coming in. So therefore, we have, of course, used C++ because that we can control. These glitches can happen everywhere. It might be very stupid things, or heat. Imagine, a server might perform completely different if it's 32 degrees within the data center or it's 24. That makes a huge difference. It cools more, it takes cycles away. There can be so many things. You install a new machine and you forget to bind the cores. So, you have multi-threaded, and all of a sudden you have one single core, and you have this wonderful program who is able to multi-thread and just runs on one core. Because someone forgot that this is a big BIOS setting that you have to set. Can happen every day. Of course, errare humanum est, error is human, and rightfully so.
I'll be very short because maybe it's late already, but the inventor of the reference, computer program, he said that the inventor of null has said that it's his biggest mistake, and he called it the $1 billion bug. The guy that invented null. So I think if you want to avoid such problems in production, like something crashes, I think everyone has seen a null pointer exception so far. Unfortunately, you need to think how you can avoid it. One example is new tools and new abstractions that programmers have built since the 70s up to now, and that's like stuff in functional programming. That's why we're trying to use this. Tools have advanced from the point of Java and C++, and have advanced where you have very advanced compilers, very advanced static type checkers, where you would want to think in advance of your model and of your programming. You wouldn't want to program to a machine. You would want to program to a theory or to a model of what you are trying to do. So my point is that the biggest thing that you can avoid such problems in the future is just build it first the right time. Think about your program that you're building, don't implement partial functions, for example. I'll just put a condition here, I'll just put an else here. You have to do this work in advance to think about what you're building, not just adapt after you have built it. So I think this is the biggest medicine to a disease is just be healthy.
Okay, so not much to add here. I would say there's no definitive answer here, and how do you prevent stuff from happening? So one way is Florin is saying is to try to prevent as much as possible by making things right the first time, like using functional programming where you can. But this will not basically prevent all the problems. I mean, we had issues when a technician in the data center tripped over a cable and basically took out a whole rack of servers. And what happened? So basically, you cannot prevent everything, unfortunately, be it bugs or these kind of operational issues. So what usually happens is that after each such occurrence, you get some preventing measures like being set in place. As Chris was saying, you do a post-mortem and then you make sure you have you have a script in place, okay, things will happen like this, and you're not allowed to do that or do that. And basically, I think everybody ends up with a whole list of such preventing measures, their own preventing measures. You try to avoid them as much as possible beforehand, and then you adapt once they happen. You take the measures, the appropriate measures.
Because no one said the obvious. Code review is one important factor there. That's something I think a lot of companies will learn by the hard way, especially if you expand the system. And usually you start with smaller teams and it's all startup culture, but all of a sudden you have a model, like an elephant of legacy code, which you can't really control anymore. So for us, for example, on the C++ side, we have usually 5 guys voting for a code review, really going through it and trying to understand. And if 3 guys say yes, then it goes through. If 2 guys say yes, then it's not going to go through. And we'll discuss it in a team meeting and see why do you see it that way. Might it have later implications, dependencies that for that one developer were not foreseeable. That's something very important for us as well.
And that's for all the code wrote in the company?
Yes, it has to be. Accept. Once it's live, there's an n number of possibilities. This is markets. It's full of humans, and it might not be a regular market movement. It might be an irregular market movement that causes an irregular function to be called. And then, as Florin already said, then you hope you didn't have an else there, and that's for sure.
Okay, and now let's one last question. So how do you see this in the future? Let's say in the next 5 or 10 years, how do you see this electronic market, automated market, growing? Where will it be?
I make it very short. I think 35 years ago I had my first hard disk. It was 20 megabytes big, and I was so proud of it. And I said, there will be never ever enough text to be written, so this hard disk is full. I forgot videos, JPEGs, and all this stuff. So where technology brings it, it will be forward. That's for sure. What do we expect? Yeah, be open for it. That's the only thing that really counts for us. I'm not Nostradamus. No one is. So I want to be open for that, and we want to be open for that. That's the important thing. I'm pretty sure it will go lightning speed. That's for sure. Never stopped. It never went slow. It never went less. It was always more. I remember in 1998, a server had 8 megabytes of RAM, 200 megabytes of hard disk. It would cost you $50,000 US. My iPhone today has much more capacity than that. And if you would have asked me then, I would have said this is not possible. It is.
I think just because we're starting to produce more data, we have more sensors, more social data, social behavior of people. I think trading will, or it already does exploit this data. But I think as the more data we'll have, the more it will be exploited in the future. And just data processing, this will be a big thing.
So I have no idea where it's going to be. I have a few possible scenarios in my head. So the way things happen on most of the markets out there is basically you have this cat and mouse game between the retail investors and the institutional investors. And so basically on new markets, emerging markets, you have a lot of retail investors, like China nowadays, right? And you have less institutional investors. And then as the market matures, you have more and more institutional investors coming in with their systems, their high performance systems, and they slowly drive the retail investors out of the market. And that's called like the market is maturing. And now the retail investors are, in a way, they are a renewable resource because new generations of people basically mature and they want to try their hand at trading. So to a certain extent, it is a renewable resource. So you will always have some retail investors out there which basically will be, in a way, I mean, it doesn't sound really nice, but they will be preyed on by the institutional investors. But most of the markets get to the point where it's mostly a fight between the institutional investors and between their systems. It's a technology game as much as it is a, I don't know, information game or strategy game. And it is a zero-sum game between, well, it's not a zero-sum game if you factor in the retail investors, but if you only look at the institutional investors, it's a zero-sum game between them, and they basically, maybe player A gets some money today, and then player B gets some money from player A tomorrow, or something like that. They move. Most of the guys, they move their earnings around. Based on that, there are multiple possible scenarios. Maybe, and there are a few trends. For example, there are some attempts to limit high-frequency trading. In order, basically, it's seen as something which is not necessarily good for the economy and for the humanity as a whole. Basically, just shifting some money from between players. And the whole effort, the whole effort invested in that, it would be better used in, I don't know, curing cancer or something like that. But so there are actually some attempts of limiting high frequency trading. For example, there's that exchange in US which basically makes all the orders to go through 50 miles of fiber, to introduce a delay, or there were some attempts to introduce random delays to the orders on some exchanges, basically just to limit this. I would say it will never completely go away, the high frequency thing. So in a way, I see it, most probably it will slowly evolve in the kind of same direction, kind of the same pace it's evolving now, with more, as my colleagues were saying, with more emphasis on data, on AI, and I don't see any significant, huge changes. Basically, it will still be the same players doing this, because the same players, they have the resources now to do the high frequency game. They will be the players which will have the resources to do the big data AI game in the future. But as I said, I have no idea. I have some possible scenarios in the head, but we will see.
Okay, yeah, sounds interesting. And hopefully we'll see more innovation in the area, not necessary to slow down. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.